Hello, hello, everybody. Thank you for making this your last session at NDC Oslo. Got a question for y'all. Who went to the keynote this morning by Scott Hunter? All right, so I know the question on your mind is, what is different between this and that? So let me be candid here. I saw the contents of the keynote the same time all of you did. So half of what you see is going to be hot off the presses, fresh off of the past couple hours, because I wanted to make sure this presentation will be giving you some new information. Now, the big difference here is this is an introductory talk. As a beginner, I have found that the best way to learn is through strange analogies and a good amount of dumb jokes. So this is what you're going to get here. Thank you for coming. Got a couple more questions for you all. How many people here work with .NET or .NET developers? Raise your hands. Or the spotlight is blinding, so make some noise even. How many people here have been using .NET for longer than 5 years? Wow, how about 10? 15? Oh, geez, okay. All right, I'm going to watch out for you guys during the Q&A, because I know you're going to be asking me the hard questions. Well, second bit I want to check is, how many people here have worked with the cloud? How about with containers? Microservices? OK, so here I'm seeing a lot of variety. Now, the good thing is, because this is an introductory talk, it's going to be accessible to you whether you're a total beginner to clouds, containers, microservices, even .NET. That's because in this talk, I'm not just going to show you how to do things. I'm going to talk a bit more about the why. Now, Hunter's keynote did an excellent job of describing what commands to type and what to click in Visual Studio or Azure to make your app work. I'm going to go a little bit of a different route here. Does that sound good to people? All right, my clicker is not liking me. So before I start monologuing too much, I'm going to take a moment to introduce myself. This is my first time at NDC, as well as my first time speaking at a non-Microsoft conference. So unless you happen to be at my lightning talk about 20 minutes ago, you probably have no idea who I am. Well, my name is Jiachen, and I work on the Azure Container Apps team. That probably tells you little to nothing about what I actually do, and what little you know probably isn't great. Now, I used to be a developer. I've worked with product managers. I get it. But I became a product manager because I wanted to spend more time deciding what to build instead of building what other people decided. So in a sentence, my job is to figure out what features developers want and work with my team of 50-ish engineers to make sure they get built and that they're actually useful for people. Before I joined the Azure Container Apps team, I spent 3 years working on .NET. Now, I worked on a couple things that maybe some of you have used before. Anyone here use Entity Framework Core? Nice. How about NuGet Package Manager? All right, good. I would be kind of nervous if you were a .NET developer and you didn't use NuGet. So nowadays, a lot of my work is still about improving the lives of .NET developers. I just work on how to make other things better for .NET instead of making .NET better for other things. With that said, as you can tell, I have a whole lot less .NET experience than most of you. I'm not standing on the stage, so I can tell you what to build. Just because I'm from Microsoft doesn't mean I know your situation. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to have my biases. I do work on Azure, but what I'm going to show you today is just one way to do things. It is a way that people across a variety of teams have spent a lot of time over the past 2 years making great, but the whole point of Aspire is to give developers more agency over how and what they can build, and to spend as little time as possible on the things they don't care about. Because of how closely our teams have worked together, that's going to be true for the tech that Aspire integrates to out of the box. like the Azure Developer CLI and Azure Container Apps. Now, I need to give a bit of a disclaimer here. I know it's hard to believe, but I am not, in fact, David Fowler. I'm not Damian Edwards. I'm not any other member of the team who built Aspire from the ground up. So if you're looking for a technical deep dive into Aspire's architecture, or you have a lot of questions about why certain design choices were made, you're not going to get that in this talk. I'm sorry. Instead, I would recommend looking up the talks that Damian and Fowler have done at NDC Sydney and at Microsoft Build. And honestly, Fowler loves talking about Aspire. He's very active on Twitter. And don't tell anybody, but if you say .NET Aspire in front of a mirror 3 times, David Fowler will materialize and talk to you about service discovery for 3 hours straight. I don't know if that's a threat or if that's a pro. I guess it just depends on who you are. What I work on is the deployment and the cloud hosting experience. So my experience with Aspire doesn't come from inventing it, but from spending a very long time messing around with it and making lots of mistakes as someone who knew very little about it to start, but had the ability to bombard the Aspire team with questions. So because of that, I'm probably a bit closer to where all of you are standing in comparison to David Fowler or Scott Hunter. So I'm hoping that this means I can tell you some things that are helpful in a different way than they can. All right, I know that was a bit of context setting here, but given that I'm a bit different than the typical speaker you're going to be seeing on the stage, I felt might be helpful. Now, how many of you are here because of .NET Aspire? Just out of curiosity, how many of you are here for Azure Container Apps? Cool, all right. I'm actually surprised that there's a bunch of you. Now, a bit of context for, I don't know, the one of you who was hungover this morning and are hearing about Aspire for the first time. .NET Aspire is a stack to build applications that work well for the cloud. Now, how many of you host on the cloud? How many Azure folks? What about AWS? Oh, OK, all right, all right. Anyone use something else? Just out of curiosity. Wow, what do you use? Hell yeah, all right. Well, now a little bit of history, right? In the olden days, before cloud hosting platforms existed, you know, the early 2000s, right? Like back in the Middle Ages, hosting involved spinning up your own web server somewhere that you manage yourself. Now, the issue with on-premise solutions like that is not only do they take time and energy to start up, but also a lot to maintain. So let's say you have a pizza shop, and you want to offer a buy one, get one free promotion for 1 weekend only. Maybe you only need 1 or 2 servers to host your ordering site when the promotion is not going on, but all the bargain hunters coming in means that you have to scale up to 10. Now, if you're hosting on-premise, you're going to have to pay for all 10 the entire time. So you can see where that might get a little bit expensive. How many of you here work on old apps? All right, good amount of people. Well, if you're a .NET developer, you have probably heard at least a bit about modernization these past few years. Now, a key part of modernization is getting your apps to work on the cloud. Unfortunately, as some of you have learned the hard way, it is not enough to take an app you wrote 10 years ago, plop it on the cloud, and walk away happy. You'll be very, very sad. For a lot of .NET developers looking into modernization, they are immediately hit with half a dozen new concepts right away, as well as a lot of opinions about what architecture that they should use and shouldn't use. I mean, I was looking at the schedule for this conference, and I swear a third of the talks are just debating distributed versus modular monolith versus whatever other buzzword comes up tomorrow about the most efficient way to build apps today. It can feel like just to modernize, you need to become an expert on the cloud, on containers, on microservices, and distributed architectures. It's like when you need experience to get a job, but you need a job to get experience. Now, for all those reasons and many more, it is difficult to get started, and that is where .NET Aspire comes in. Now, for most devs, modernization means getting their apps to scale, to be resilient, and to work everywhere. This tends to involve some form of containers. Now, containers are units of software that contain all the dependencies and libraries the code needs to work right in the box. So no worrying about what's in the container, just care about what it does. My favorite thing about containers, however, is they fix my #1 most hated problem with code, which is getting a really, really weird error, but everyone else on my team just goes, "It works on my machine." How many of you here have dealt with that before? Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. Well, I worked as an assistant for an introductory computer science course for about 3 or 4 years, and the first week of setting up everyone's environments and getting things to work was always the worst. And considering these were students who had only ever done Python, and the rest of the course was about writing a search engine from scratch using C, that's saying something. You know, these guys were dealing with memory deallocation for the first time. They had to deal with segmentation faults, but the most painful bit was getting set up for things to work. This is something that eats up a ridiculous amount of time, even if you are a grizzled veteran with decades of programming experience under your belt. I see you. And in some ways, it actually gets worse the deeper in you get, especially when you start working with the cloud. Now, containers are important for building apps that work well for the cloud because cloud apps need to run on any machine. And you know, packaging everything you build in multiple formats to run in different environments, from Windows to Linux to Macs to mobile, that gets old fast. Now, containers are also scalable and perform well. Again, really important for cloud apps. Now, the final frontier for many people is moving to a distributed architecture. You might know this by the name of microservices. I know, buzzword. Bear with me. These are going to be apps with at least a few different parts involved, usually way more than a few, and they can share data with each other, they can process tasks at the same time, and they can share the workload. So think about it like being on an engineering team. Instead of having just one developer doing everything, you can scale services independently instead of scaling the whole thing. So you can hire another backend developer instead of hiring someone who's full stack. You get fault isolation, which means you can quarantine the error to one part of the application so it doesn't affect everything else. Now, that's kind of dark in the context of a development team, but I'm sure you know what I mean here. You also get continuous delivery and deployment. So instead of needing to wake up at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning to deal with on-call, you have someone who's in a different time zone with different cultural holidays who will do that for you. But microservices have their downsides as well. And to show you in a concise way, I am going to take 3 minutes of your time to show you one of my favorite videos on the internet. Now, I really hope audio works. Fingers crossed.
Just one feature. Why is this taking 3 years to go live? Look, it's not that simple, all right? I have priorities, my team has deadlines, we have other deliverables in progress.
I'm still not understanding this. Why is it so hard to display the birthday date on the settings page? Why can't we get this done this quarter?
Look, I'm sorry, we've been over this. It's the design of our back end. First we have to call the bingo service. See, bingo knows everyone's name-o, so we get the user's ID out of there. Then from bingo, we can call papaya and MBS to get that user ID and turn it into a user session token. We can validate those with Omnop, and then, once we have that, we can finally pull the user's info down from Raccoon.
Yeah, but couldn't the Raccoon team basically just...
No, Raccoon isn't guaranteed to have that info. Before we do this, we have to go to Wingman, do a query to see if the user's willing to take it to the next level, or if they're just playing the field.
Now, Wingman is cool, but he doesn't store any user info himself. He has to reach out to other user info provider services, like RGS, Barbie Doll, Ringo2, BLS.
But how does it know what all the user provider services are? Well, for that, it has to go to Galactic, all-knowing user service provider aggregator. And while Galactus has omniscient knowledge of all current user info providers, it doesn't have future sight or knowledge of past user info providers, so it expects a time range. To get all the current user info providers, we need to pass a time range with the current time and a time representing the end of the universe, which we get from EKS, our entropy chaos service. EKS is being deprecated at the end of the month for Omegastar, but Omegastar still doesn't support ISO timestamps like they said they would a month ago, so until Omegastar gets their fucking shit together, we're blocked. We can't get signed up for our use case, we can't use EKS, there's nothing we can do.
So Galactus won't be able to find our new birthday boy provider, which means Wingman won't know how to talk to anybody, which means I won't be able to find true love and I'll die alone. I'll die alone, without ever knowing love, without ever knowing it's my birthday. We're blocked, okay? We're blocked, you sad, pathetic little product manager. You think you know what our users want? You know nothing of my pain, of Galactus's pain. You think you know what it takes to tell the user it's their birthday? You know nothing. Delivering this feature goes against everything I know to be right and true, and I will sooner lay you into this barren earth than entertain your folly for a moment longer.
All right, so clearly this is Blocker. No problem, we'll push this out another 2 to 3 years or so. Learned a lot today, love Galactus. But we'll talk next week about adding middle names to the profile. Awesome, sounds good. Take care.
So I don't know what it says about me, but that video was one of the big reasons I chose to work on a microservices team. So take that as you will. Now, I think the hardest microservices-related question is, do I actually want that in my life? Because just like working on a team, microservices can be really great or really terrible. An application with a dozen different pieces might be more flexible and performant, just like a team with a dozen people, but it's also going to be more complicated to manage than an application that's all in one. Now, if communication isn't efficient, if you have stand-ups every day for an hour, for example, it's going to take more time to get things done than if a single dev was doing the whole thing. And as you just saw, making a single change can mean a lot of work. And that question, are microservices right for me? That's so difficult to answer because it completely depends on what you're building, what your priorities are, and what your scenario is. And you're not going to get a good answer from anyone unless you build or at least prototype it. Right now, that's pretty hard to do. There is a lot of investment you need upfront. Managing a distributed service can require a full ops team. Designing and building up that new architecture or converting your existing monolith tends to be pretty difficult. The big thing, though, is there's a lot to learn just to build distributed applications. It's the you need experience to get a job, but you need a job to get experience thing all over again. What .NET Aspire does is it helps you figure out whether or not you want microservices by letting you do so with minimal investment and risk. And I was going to show you how by going through some code, but because you've already seen that this morning at the keynote, I'm going to move on. One question, though, how many of you have ever tried to build a distributed application in .NET? Okay, a couple hands. How many of you had a good time, like you enjoyed it? Wow, I am genuinely impressed. Can I get a round of applause for these guys? Because, okay, it is possible to build distributed applications in .NET. The functionality and the building blocks have always been there. But it's not easy. And there are brave souls out here among us who have invested the time into learning the best practices and putting all those pieces together. But for most people, especially those just starting out, it's not quite so straightforward. Moving on. So let's talk through the big microservices problems and how .NET Aspire helps with that. Problem number one, you have to be an expert just to get started. Now, .NET Aspire .NET Aspire solves that by offering a code-driven app model instead of a list of things to click in Visual Studio that's not exactly intuitive. It's like you get a Lego set with instructions written in Sanskrit instead of English or Norwegian, whatever is the language of your choice. So with Aspire, you can work in the medium that you have the most experience in, which is C# code, instead of having to learn a totally new way to do things. It also provides containerization and orchestration just right out of the box. You don't have to deal with Docker files. You don't have to think about Docker Compose. You don't have to be an expert in containers to start using them. You can start with the code, and with this concept called progressive disclosure, you don't have to learn what you don't need to know. Second microservices problem, the building blocks can be hard to find and/or unreliable. Working with microservices can feel like you have to first track down a bunch of Lego pieces when some are in the crevices of the couch and your dog ate one 3 months ago. It takes you a lot of time, it's stressful, and you will probably learn and see things that you wish you didn't. .NET Aspire solves that problem by making existing building blocks easy to find and creating new pieces to replace DIY solutions that didn't work great. So you're not going to get an EKS that's going to get deprecated out of nowhere, no Omega Star replacements that have critical gaps, and there is already a huge amount of Aspire packages available, as you saw this morning, and the number will only grow as developers outside the .NET team contribute. It's almost like an app store for microservices components with way more emphasis on the app part and less on the store. Third and last problem, it is difficult to go from start to end with the same experience. When you move from code to containers, from containers to cloud, from containers to microservices, from monoliths to microservices, you're going to have to use different tools. You're going to have to adjust to different contexts. You don't get the same experience all the way through, and personally, I think it's worse to start off great and then fail halfway through than to start off and be like, okay, this is hard, I give up right now. It's like you're traveling between islands, and instead of getting a map that shows you the whole journey and one boat that you can sail the entire time, you have to track down each scrap of the map as you go and switch ships every time. That doesn't sound really fun to me. I mean, we're software developers, we aren't pirates. I mean, not that type of pirate, at least. So the Aspire solution to that is to create a seamless journey from code to cloud. Code to containers to the cloud. Now, because we're going with the Lego theme, here are some magnificently deployed Lego giraffes out there in Legoland, California, that's built to withstand, like 100-degree Fahrenheit, 100-degree weather on a daily basis. And there are some cans of worms out there with microservices, and Aspire doesn't make them go away, but it does give you the choice of when or if you want to open that can of worms. In conclusion, modernizing is important, but it means risk, it means investment, and especially if you are taking the leap into the deep end with microservices, even if you theoretically know what to do, it's nice to have a little bit of guidance. Think about it like skydiving, right? It's pretty easy in theory. Technically, you deploy your parachute, you avoid being a villain in a Disney movie at the end of the movie. But if it's your first time falling a few thousand feet, you probably want to have a guy strapped to your back. Because once you're in free fall, once you're in the middle of it, there's not a lot of room for mistakes. And even things that you should know are hard to remember to do in the right order. Now, having the guy on your back now doesn't mean you have to bring him along every time. It just trains you to get the skills so you can do it without dying, which is great. Now, I don't think the experience with microservices has the same mortality rate as skydiving, but I could be wrong. So I was going to talk a bit about what deployment to the cloud looks like. Again, something covered in the keynote this morning. But I want to emphasize that we can use all the normal methods that we usually do. Bicep, ARM, the Azure CLI, you can use CI/CD, you can set up GitHub Actions. And sure, the Azure Developer CLI is sort of the go-to here, But what it does is it's more of a bicep assistant than a bicep replacement. It guides you through the process of putting your code in containers, provisioning your resources, and deploying to the cloud. It's giving you training wheels for the bicycle that is bicep, or even the unicycle that is arm. The commands that you give AZD, they're all generating bicep under the hood. Now, the files that you get can act more as a template, something to build off of. You can edit that bicep yourself, or you can just yank them out and put them into your own deployment pipelines. So let me take a moment to take a step back. We talked a lot about Aspire. We talked a lot about deployment. Where are we deploying to? So Azure Container Apps, well, who here has heard of Azure Container Apps? Who here has used it? All right, OK. Well, Azure Container Apps is the default destination for .NET Aspire right now, and that's because it really focuses on solving the same problems that Aspire does. It provides an easy entry point to a pretty complicated space, while also giving you the opportunity to customize and to scale when you need it. There was a great talk yesterday about Azure Container Apps that went into a bunch of detail about Dapper and revisions. So I'm going to talk about this at a higher level of why would you care? Why would you want to use Azure Container Apps? Because it's not the best solution for everything. So I want to be candid with you all about what's a good fit and what's maybe not. If I had to put it in one sentence, Azure Container Apps is a serverless platform for hosting applications on the cloud using containers. Now, those are certainly all words, so let's take a moment to break it down. Because Azure Container Apps is serverless, that differentiates it from something a bit more hands-on, like Azure Kubernetes Service. It doesn't mean that there are no servers involved. It just means that developers don't have to worry about them most of the time. Now, one cool thing about serverless is the ability to scale according to need, including scale to 0. So if your app isn't being used, you don't get charged money for it. Now, that's great if you work in an industry with seasonal demands like banks and other financial companies. It's also great for small to mid-sized companies, especially those that are actively growing, because they don't know how much traffic they're going to get yet. So it's nice to start small and have the ability to scale up as needed. Container Apps is also a platform. So that means it's meant to be a one-stop shop that integrates with a whole lot of other tools. The screenshot on the right shows you some of the features like identity and certificate management, a lot of other security best practices, observability, scaling integration. And the great thing is you don't have to go into this platform knowing exactly what you want, right? Like usually when I'm building an app, I'm not starting off saying, yeah, I want a container app that integrates with Azure Key Vault and authenticates Kata scaling rules with managed identity, and then go through and track it all down. I prefer starting off small, seeing what my options are, figuring out what fits me best, and going, hey, I can integrate with Key Vault. I can use Kata scale rules. I can use managed identity. Now, as a product manager, I've spoken to a lot of developers who use container apps. And I'm biased. I'm not going to talk too much about my own opinions, so I'm going to talk about what they think. Many of them work as consultants, or they do contract work for government agencies or small to mid-sized companies that don't have in-house engineers. They really do not want to deal with cluster management or container orchestration, and they especially don't want to piece together functionality from scratch. They want a more hands-off solution. They want guidance and opinions instead of having to learn and decide everything by themselves. Now, as a platform, Container Apps meets their minimum needs and fulfills security requirements of the companies that they're working with without requiring a whole lot of upfront investment and knowledge. Now, because of how much functionality is integrated in, there's a huge amount of potential to grow. Now, the last bit, which in my opinion is also the most important because it's in the name. We talked a little bit about containers already and how they are often the first step towards modernization. Now, as a reminder, containers are units of software that have all the dependencies and libraries that the code needs to work right out of the box. While Aspire makes it easy to write your code and get it into containers, Container Apps makes it easy to get your containers to production and keep them working well. And you'll notice that I'm talking about containers. I'm not talking about microservices. Now, it's a common misconception that Azure Container Apps is for microservices first and foremost. And don't get me wrong, the Container Apps experience for microservices is pretty great, especially in comparison to the developer experience of some of the other stuff out there. But there are plenty of people on the platform. I think last I saw, about 50% of people, they're not going that far. Just having containers already meet their needs for modernization. I've talked to a lot of developers who use container apps for simpler apps, like jobs and queues and integrations. And they do that because they like their developer experience and they want to save money. And if at some point they do need microservices, it's a natural progression that can grow within the same ecosystem. It's also nice that containers are language agnostic. You don't really have to think purely in .NET. You can build apps that has, I don't know, one container with Python to take care of your data needs, for example. Now, because there's a range of what works on container apps, it is a great option if you're still on the fence about modernization and you don't know how far you want to go. Because here you have the flexibility to start small with a single container or two. You can add Redis over time or databases or whatever else you need, and to level up to full microservices once you get to the point that you are actually sure that you need them. You know, it's not all or nothing here. You can choose what's just right for you. So even if you decide, after trying things out a bit, actually I want to stick with my monolith, or I want to modernize in smaller steps, Container Apps still offers benefits and the freedom to grow when you want to. Now I'm going to do some maneuvering to switch over to duplicating my screen, because I want to walk you through a Container Apps environment. All right, so here is a resource group that I deployed a little bit earlier today, fresh off of watching the keynote. And let me walk you through what this resource group looks like. We have a container registry, we have managed identity, we have four container apps, as well as a container app environment. Now, the mapping to Kubernetes here is an environment for container apps is like a cluster, while each individual one are like separate nodes. So we can go into the environment here, and let's see. All right, this is a very skinny screen. Well, a couple things. You can see all the container apps that are in here. You'll see that the .NET Aspire dashboard works on container apps, or in theory it should. Not sure what's happening now. I'll be back in a bit. And you can go into the individual container apps to see what you can do. Now, this isn't fun. I see 4. It's showing me none. Let's go through it the other way. So this is Store. This is a Blazor front-end web app that I deployed a while ago. And fortunately, I am missing the sidebar. All right, well, I guess with any live demo, something always has to go wrong, so I'm going to call that here. But what I wanted to show you was essentially the screenshot I had before around all the different options. Let me. Yep, now you can see all the things that I wanted to talk about, but cannot. All right, so everything I wanted to talk about, you did get a glimpse of it in the keynote, but the key thing is you get a nice visual depiction of everything within your environment. You have a nice resource visualizer, shows you all the connections. You have the Aspire dashboard to do some quick and easy testing of your prototypes. And there's something called multi-revision mode. Single revision mode. So a revision is essentially a new version of a container app. And the hard thing about switching from an old thing to a new thing is you don't want your service to get interrupted, right? Like you don't want that 5 milliseconds to crash 100 people in Romania. Now, container apps allows you to move the traffic over in a very seamless way. Whenever you push a change, it just swaps it over in a way that your users don't even notice. There's also scaling rules that you can set up for container apps. We talked a little bit before about scale to 0. Now, this is something you can set up in the Azure portal, or you can just have it as part of your deployment pipeline so you can get real granular control. Well, that's all I've got for you folks. In conclusion, here are the 3 parts to the cloud deployment experience for .NET Aspire. And each of these products have their own teams that work together to make this seamless end-to-end experience. Aspire lets you jump into modernization with a code-based model made for developers by developers. It provides an app store, emphasis on app, of components to use, and it allows you to containerize without having to be Docker experts. Now, there's a bunch of ways to deploy, but Azure Developer CLI is a nice kind of midpoint where it's easy to get started, but you also have the option to say, hey, show me the bicep, show me the granular stuff, and have that control. Finally, we have container apps, which saves you money with scale to 0, offers a one-stop shop as a platform to get many of the tools that you need, even a lot of the open source tools that are associated with the Kubernetes ecosystem. And the thing with container apps is it works great whether you have a single job in a container or a microservices with dozens of container apps working together. Again, this flow is built for developers by developers. And how that shows is each part works great on its own and even better together. But you still have the freedom to swap things out when you want or need. Now, I work for Azure, but I'll say, yeah, you can use AWS with this, it's going to interchange pretty well. Nothing's getting taken away from you, nothing's getting deprecated. You can still use what you know and love, you just get more options. That's it from me, folks. Thank you for choosing to make this talk your last session at NDC Oslo. Sorry about the lack of a live demo per se, but I'll give you some time back. Now, this is my first talk, especially one in front of such a big audience. So I would love to get whatever feedback you can give from that QR code above. Now, those multicolored cards are great, they're fun, but they don't tell me a whole lot about how I can improve. Now, if you want to go through the code I did not show you today and get more insight about how specifically to get an Aspire app from initialization to production ready, so what I'm talking about is adding a cache store like Redis, adding a Postgres database, showing a way to connect to Postgres without going to connectionstrings.com or, oh God, that website is so old, and finding that connection string and having to set up everything manually yourself. Anyways, you can go to the aka.ms link above to find the workshop that this talk drew from. So thanks, everybody, and safe travels.